When I interviewed you about the book, you talked about how growing up in a home with two parents that were both immigrants was the most fundamentally formative part of my life. And I was just wondering, why exactly is that? What do you think, growing up in that household, how did that inform your identity growing up?
Well, I I think the main thing is that when your parents have come from the other side, they know what it's like to suffer. I mean, they went through the war. That's the second war. And they both knew hunger. You know, it's unimaginable to us in America. And so they went through that. They both lost their fathers when they were 10. My dad did and my mother did. So they have real stories of hardship. And that's how they raised my brother and me, my brother John. You know, that's reality. That was their reality 5 minutes before. And that's the world in which we grew up, in a sense. So it's a different world than the average American. And so when I was 9 and we moved to Connecticut, and I'm around all these American kids, because when I was in New York, I was in a Greek Orthodox, bubble. It was we went to parochial school, Greek Orthodox parochial school, Transfiguration Church of Transfiguration in Corona, Queens. But suddenly I was in Connecticut, and we went to public school, and I was in school with kids whose parents weren't from Greece or whatever, and I thought, wow, they have a different perspective. They don't really know suffering. They grew up in the 50s or in the 40s in America, and it was just not anything like what my parents went through. So my parents taught me to hate communism. They taught me to know that there's an evil in the world, and that what we have in America, this freedom, is just not normal. It's wonderful, and they were thrilled to come here. And the cover of the book is my father at the Statue of Liberty, and it was taken by my mother. They were on a date in 1958, and I asked both of them to tell me their stories about passing the Statue of Liberty, and that's in my previous book, If You Can Keep It. But they both felt it was a really emotional experience. It really meant something to them. This is liberty. They're coming to America. So I grew up with that, and I think a lot of Americans, we can be naive about evil, about communism, about how bad things can get, because we've had it so good here. But my parents raised me with a sense of what that was, of how bad things can be because they had suffered, and how good we have it in America and how we need to cherish it. So that's a big part of the immigrant experience for me.
Yeah, and you talked about how you saw the other kids and they just seemed to have such different lives than you. Did you feel like an outsider, or was there this underlying, I'm an American, I feel like I'm part of a larger community?
Well, I mean, the reason that the book is titled Fish Out of Water, there are two reasons. One is that I always felt like a fish out of water, not in some horrible traumatic sense, but I never quite felt like I fit in. When I was among the Greeks, because my mother was German, I never felt Greek enough, because at home we spoke English. We didn't speak Greek like all the other kids. So I never felt like I was Greek enough. And being Greek among Greeks is a very high virtue. And so you kind of get that feeling like I'm not good enough because I'm not Greek enough, which is sort of funny, but it's as a kid you notice that. And then when I was around the American kids, my parents didn't know the same things that the American kids' parents did. So, we didn't have a dog, and we didn't, play baseball in the yard and all the stuff that American boys do. So there was always that feeling of being a little bit out of step. And that kind of just goes through my life. I skipped a grade, so I was always the smallest kid in the class because I was younger and small to begin with. And so there's a lot of that. And then when I get to Yale, I don't fit in really because I'm a working class son of immigrants, and this is a new environment with sort of an elite cultural group that I had encountered for the first time. So that's kind of a theme for me. And then at the end of the book, I won't give away the punchline too much, but it becomes very meaningful. The fish out of water image becomes extremely meaningful and blows my mind and changes my life. And that is the climax of the book, and I want it to end there. So it's right around my 25th birthday.
And then just one last question for me about, kind of your immigrant experience, and just asking, your thoughts on this one issue. I wrote a story a couple weeks back about the kind of the struggle in America today and how it's between some of us want a multicultural society and some of us are seeking cultural pluralism. The difference being, Democrats who want cultural or who want multiculturalism, they don't really think that we should all, meld together and have shared values. They're just basically saying like, yeah, we should all stay in our different sects. We should all have our different cultures and we should respect that and not intermingle as much. Whereas, the American ideal, what this country was basically built to do was to bring in all sorts of cultures and then come together with some basic shared values. And that's what it meant to be an American. And as a child of immigrants and someone that grew up in that household, do you think we're starting to lose that kind of shared American identity that used to make us so strong?
Michael, are you kidding? Yes. We're not starting. The answer is actually no. We're not starting to lose it.
Yeah.
We are well on our way toward losing it if we haven't lost it altogether. That's part of what I understood. And again, I wrote that in my previous book, or one of my previous books, If You Can Keep It. This idea that I understood that my parents were as American as George Washington.
Right.
When you share these values, you buy into these values, you love America, you love what this is. My father always taught me to love the fact that I'm Greek and Greeks have huge pride, but they're not living in Greece. They're living here because they want to live here. They love America. And, they wish Greece were more like America in a sense, right? That there are things about this country which are not meant only to be here. They're meant for the whole world. God doesn't want only Americans to be free and to have religious liberty. The whole world is meant to have that. And so we are meant to be a shining city on a hill, to quote Jesus, who was quoted by John Winthrop, who was quoted by a number of presidents, a shining city on a hill, so that people look at it and they say, I want that. That is wonderful. What is that? And what that is a culture of freedom that comes out of a respect for the Bible and a respect for the God of the Bible, and that is transmuted into a culture that is able to welcome every kind of culture and is able to celebrate other kinds of cultures because it has this basis which has no bearing on ethnicity or religion. It is universal. And so there's the irony, is that if you really love America, you're loving it universal. You're loving something that doesn't say, we don't like other people. You're basically saying that I love America because America exists for other people. America has always been here to welcome other people, and people have come here and have embraced our values. When they come here and they don't embrace our values, which really began happening in the 60s and 70s, where we didn't require people to really become American. We just said, you just come here. That obviously is unhealthy. You can't have a culture that doesn't know what it is, that doesn't have a universal baseline that says this is what we all believe, these are our shared values. And so that's when things began to go very wrong. And so things have been going very wrong for 50 or so years. And I think that we're so far along that path that the real question is, can we find our way back? And that's part of why I do what what I write about and what I talk about, because we have to find our way back. It's our only hope. There's no way America can be America unless we find ourselves, unless we begin to understand what that means. And for 50 years, we've not been teaching that, and we've not been celebrating it. And if you don't celebrate it, you don't teach it, you don't preserve it, and it goes away. So.